Let's get this audio going. Hey everybody, it is 6 o'clock right now. If you would like to put some of your questions over in the chat, I will start going through them and we'll jump right into this. I will answer as many as I possibly can. You guys have me for an hour, so anything you can think of, I'd be happy to help. By the way, while we're waiting for a couple people to join, feel free to drop where you're from. I see some people from, let's get this audio going, Virginia. Oh, I hear my own voice. There we go. I've got Virginia and Miami and Yonkers. Okay, cool. Northern California, United Kingdom. Perfect. Excellent. By the way, I wanted to let you guys know, if you are watching this on the Adorama page and not on YouTube and you want to ask questions, you actually have to go to YouTube to be able to go into the chat. So I just want to make sure you knew that. Let's get this. But of course, you can just, if you just want to watch, you can just watch from the Adorama page. All right. Northern Mississippi and Turkey and Boston, Austin, Scotland, Bahamas. I always think this is so cool. I don't think that there's a better way to bond and a better time to bond with people across the world than right now and through things like this where we can share and learn. So I think it's kind of awesome. Okay, so I'm ready to go, guys. If you want to drop some questions into the chat over here on YouTube, feel free. To get us started off, I wanted to just chat in general with some things that I've been thinking about recently while questions are coming in. So as I talked about in the webinar earlier today, we were talking about business strategy and using this time for things that always seem to get pushed aside. I think you have to achieve a balance of productivity and personal fulfillment, rewarding you. I mean, for example, I basically watch a movie every night. And, you know, sometimes something like that feels that maybe it's not productive, but after trying to be productive all day and needing to unwind, it's good to do something like that. But what I've been doing recently is aiming to watch beautiful films. And I sit there with my phone, and when there's a beautiful frame or beautiful lighting, I take a photograph. And I'm using it as a way to unwind and relax. But if something really strikes me, I'll also use it as inspiration. You know, things like that, so it doesn't feel like all work, but also you don't want to feel like no work either. So it needs to be a good balance. Okay, so I'm going to jump in. I see some people have some questions, so let's do this right away. Someone told me I'm too white. Listen, I'm really pale, okay? Okay, for someone that never ever worked, this is for Paulo. For someone that never ever worked with Flash, which one would you advise me to start from zero? Okay, so first and foremost, I actually, if you've never worked with artificial lighting before, if you've only worked with natural light, one of the things I would recommend you do is start with a hot light. I'm talking about like a Home Depot $17 silver dish with a bulb. And I recommend you start there first and foremost to pay attention to how you can shape light. How you can move light left to right, up and down, what it does to the face, how you can modify it, how you can change it. Like, just in case you have never worked with directionality of light and seeing the light before. I actually have a completely free tutorial. If you look it up, it's called Learning to Read and See the Light. And in this tutorial, there's a video and a companion guide. What it does is it shows you how to look at a photograph and tell how it was lit. And so what I do when I look at a photograph is I'm looking at three main things. I'm looking at shadows, catch lights, and highlights. When I look at the shadows, I'm looking for the edge of the shadows. So I'm looking for a defined edge or a soft edge. It tells me the quality of light. I'm looking for the direction of shadows. Is it a long shadow, which means the light's far off to the side? Is it a short shadow, which means maybe the light's more centered? I'm looking for the fill of the shadow, meaning is it light or dark shadow, which means is there a fill light? Is there a reflector? Something like that. I'm looking at the highlights to see if there's rim lights or highlights on different light sources in the scene. And then I'm also looking for catch lights. When I can see the reflections in the eyes, that's how I can usually tell both placement of light and the modifier that's being used. So first and foremost, you asked about speed lights, but I'm just saying if you have never worked with strobes or artificial light at all, I would start with just trying to understand directionality of light. But if you're talking about specific speed lights, honestly, going super cheap for your first speed light is totally fine if you're just trying to practice. I would start with one speed light. Don't go ahead and buy a kit. Like, learn to understand how to control power output, understanding how shutter speed, aperture, and ISO work together, and then work up to modifiers, and then work up to then considering if you want additional strobe. So kind of a long answer, but honestly, in that case, most any speed light is a good place to start. You also have to consider the theory or the saying, if you buy something good, you only cry once. Meaning, like, if you spend the money up front on something that's like good quality gear, it might be expensive, but you only have to buy it once. Usually it's good quality and lasts a long time. But of course, if you're just learning, then, you know, if you don't mind wasting the money and starting with something inexpensive and then moving up later on, that's also fine. It just depends on what philosophy you live by. Okay. So next up, Elton said, when do you or don't you use a light meter? And let me just make sure you can all hear me okay. Okay, cool. All right. So here's the thing. What's really helpful is if you're first starting off with studio lighting, using a light meter is incredibly helpful, because fundamentally what it does is you take a meter reading of the light hitting your subject and it tells you what to put your camera at. And so you don't have to guess if you don't understand what's correctly exposed, what's overexposed, what's underexposed. Basically what you do, if no one's ever used a light meter before, is you would go in there and you would set your ISO. So I could say ISO 100, 200, 500, whatever it is. I have the light meter near my face with the dome pointing towards the camera. And by the way, there's a couple different ways to do this. You can individually meter a light with dome in, or you can do dome out to get light in the scene. But long story short, you point the meter towards the camera or towards the light. You take a reading. It tells you what to set your camera at. So I don't use a light meter most of the time. Fundamentally, why is a lot of times I'm purposefully over or underexposing the light anyway. I'm shooting tethered, so I can actually look at my histogram and see how the exposure is. But anytime I need to be able to recreate the scene exactly, then I absolutely take light meter readings. So for example, there's a client that I have NBC. So I shoot headshots and conceptual portraits for NBC. And what we have is we have two settings. We have a headshot setup and then we have a creative setup. And they shoot everybody with these two different lighting setups. And they want it to be consistent because the conceptual ones are actually on a wall in 30 Rock. They need to be the same every time. And I've shot with them maybe 8 different days. So I need to take exactly, like, needs to be the same modifier, same meter readings, etc. So meter readings, taking a meter reading helps you save time, but it also helps you with repeatability. So it kind of depends on what you're comfortable with. All right. Francesco says, when you are finished with a shoot, are you happy with your work? So there are two different things you could be asking here. First and foremost, one thing you could be asking is, like, when I'm done with a shoot, do I feel good about it? Like, am I like always happy with my work? To answer that question, when I go into a shoot, I always know the goals that I'm trying to achieve. Sometimes I'm trying to flatter my subject, and so that's the goal, and I'm trying to make sure that they're happy with the portraits. Sometimes the point of the shoot is creativity, so I'm trying to experiment with something new. Sometimes the point is there's a particular goal, message, effect that a client, like an advertising agency, is trying to achieve. So I always go into a shoot just knowing my goals, and that's how I decide if I'm actually happy with the shoot. I mean, most of the time I'm happy. I mean, there's certainly sometimes where I'm like, man, if I would have thought of XYZ, maybe that would have been better. This is one of the reasons why I try to do a lot of preparation. So for all of my shoots, I build mood boards, whether they're commercial or whether they're personal. Now, a mood board is a collection of images based upon a theme that communicates the visual direction of a shoot. So that's fancy talk for basically like a bunch of photos you look at to know what the shoot's going to look like. And typically you have images that will show hair and makeup, wardrobe, maybe possible posing, composition, color palettes, all of that stuff. And so when you're working with a creative team, everybody sees the mood board so they know what you're trying to achieve. And then they can each do their part. So every shoot that I do, there's mood boards. When it's commercial shoots, the ad agencies or the commercial clients, they're actually doing they're usually doing a lot of the mood board work. So they're putting together what we call decks. They'll send over a deck and they'll have loose inspiration, layout, and all of that kind of stuff. The whole point is we're trying to get rid of as much of the guesswork on the day as possible so you can be inspired on the day but not have any problems pop up along the way. So for the most part, I think one of the reasons my shoots generally are successful is I do a lot of planning ahead of time to allow me to be spontaneous and try something new on the day of the shoot once I know I've accomplished what our goals are. The other question you might be asking was that when you're finished with a shoot, are you happy with your work? Maybe about like retouching, finishing the finishing touches. When I shoot, pretty much always, unless I'm on location and it's inconvenient, I pretty much always shoot tethered. What that means is I have a cord, a tether cable, connecting my camera to my computer. And you can use Capture One or Lightroom. And as I shoot, the images come up on my screen and I'm making tweaks. So as I'm shooting, even though the skin isn't retouched, I am adjusting contrast and white balance and hue, saturation, luminance. I'm making changes to get it closer to what my vision is in the end. Basically how I describe it is I'm making sure that the file has enough in its core, enough in the raw image to know I can take it to where I need to with the final post-processing. So I hardly ever consider the image done straight out of camera. I actually just posted images to Instagram today and yesterday that were raw, straight out of camera, didn't need retouching, but they're more straightforward, clean images. And so that was the purpose of the photograph. But retouching is an important part of my entire creative process. It's kind of like finishing everything on the painting, but the final details. It's not a finished work. So my retouching and color grading is a very important part of the process. The color grading is that final bit of mood and directing the eye. James Freeman, do you think it's a good idea to try to get beauty clients through makeup artists you've worked with? That is actually one of the things I mentioned in a webinar. My makeup artists have been one of the most important ways that I've found connections to beauty clients, because these makeup artists, they either already have the contacts to like what they call the PRs, the public relations, so that the people that are trying to promote the brand, sometimes those people can get you social media work. Also, I'll have makeup artists that I seek out that end up being brand ambassadors for different makeup brands, and then they know the people to talk to and they recommend me. Or when I do creative shoots with these makeup artists, the makeup brands, especially if they're successful makeup artists, are following those makeup artists. They see my work, and it's another way to get my images in front of those clients. So I have found that working with the right people has been one of the easiest, most successful ways to instantly get my work in front of the right people. You just have to figure out your target clients, who are they already looking at online, and then find a way to entice those people to shoot with you. I spend a lot of time trying to do that. Rusty Myers, I wish I had a question, but I'm not a pro and still listening. No problem. It helps me keep busy since I'm working my regular day job from home. Perfect. Glad to have you here, Rusty. Greetings from London, Peru. Life's Beautiful. That's a cute name. From Morristown, New Jersey, right around the corner from me. You saw my posing book, and I hope you enjoy it. Donna Lear. You mentioned photographing your style that you love. However, more than likely, that won't pay the bills. It's usually cookie cutter stuff. So, really good point. What I have found is twofold. Some of the most exciting things I shoot, it was my style. My style was the reason that they came to me. They needed something so specific, whether it's gels or a certain color profile or whatever it may be, and they used my images as inspiration and then reached out to me because if they want it done and they want it done right in that look, they need to hire me. That being said, a lot of my commercial work is super cookie cutter, but the reason that my style is important is because if people are looking at a million photographers that all do the same cookie cutter look, how the heck are they going to remember me? This is particularly true with social media, as well as marketing, actual physical promos. When you think about it on social media, people that have like a nice standard but good quality imagery, but just nice without any individual style, it is very rare that those people ever build a following, because having a curated style is what people are attracted to. They're attracted to knowing what your particular way of looking at the world is. And they want to see how you see the world over and over and over again. So that's how certain art directors will follow me, and makeup artists. And it doesn't mean I can't do the other work. And that's why if you look at my website, if you go to, it's lindsayadlerphotography.com, you go to my skin portfolio. It is not, it's still my style. It's still my take on things, but it's not like creative lighting and colorful and avant-garde. It is like super clean, basic lighting. It shows that I can do the work they need, but hopefully I attracted them with some of more eye-catching imagery. And just to note, I recently did a job for the cosmetic company Morphe. And it was crazy colors and really cool lighting effects. And it was the work that I do. Of course, on the other side of it, I have makeup brands that hire me to do close-up of eyes where basically I contribute nothing. It's a beauty dish, and then the makeup artist puts on mascara, and it's my job just to photograph it. So it's all the extremes. McCullough Imagery, Lindsay, what are the ways or a few things a new photographer can do to speed up the learning curve to have a more polished portfolio for headshots, portraits, and events? I think one important thing, if you can find a way to do it, is if you can find a way to assist or intern for another photographer to watch and get to the point where you are anticipating their next move. If you get to the point where you know what they're going to do next, that means you understand what you would do in that situation and how to handle it. So I also understand that not everybody is at that point. So one of the more powerful and important things I think you need to do is set up personal time to shoot and experiment. I don't know why, but a lot of beginning photographers try to learn on the job. They're like, oh, I need to get paid because my gear is expensive, which is true, but then they're learning as they're going. And you always learn as you go, but you definitely should set up times to just plain old simple experiment with lighting, play with depth of field, learn what your focal length difference makes. And it's a combination of watching tutorials or going to workshops and then doing it. An accountability partner photographer, someone else that's at the same point you're at, and then you guys learn and experiment together. Or maybe it's a photographer that has a little bit more experience than you, can guide the way, wants to mentor, but you also help them on their shoots. I think that's one of the more powerful ways to learn. I have a degree in photography. One of the things I went to college for was photography. And I remember when, I think it was my senior year, I went to New York on a field trip, and we watched a fashion photographer do a shoot. And I cannot tell you how much I learned just from watching that photographer work. I had taken so many lighting classes. I had taken an entire 4 years of school, and then I saw this guy actually shoot, and I just felt my brain exploding with understanding photography at a new level. So actually seeing it in practice really makes a big difference. Okay. Joey McDermott, hi. My process is to hand the subject the color checker to get the color balance correct. Is there another option so you aren't getting within someone's 6 feet of space? No, it's fine. Jimmy, you can just step back and pass. Do you mind holding this and show them how to hold it? And for those of you who don't know, a color checker is, it's basically it's a grid of all these different colors and gray, black, and white. And a person will hold it in front of their face. When you take a photograph of it, it should be lit by your actual main light. And then in Photoshop or Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, Capture, whatever your post-processing software is, you take your white balance eyedropper, you click on the gray or neutral point, and it gets rid of any color cast. Your color can vary drastically depending on the strobe you're using, as well as the speed you're shooting at. Inexpensive strobes, the color temperature will actually vary as you shoot. More expensive ones, that's not a problem. And it will also vary drastically based on your modifier. There's a huge difference in color temperature from me using a zoom reflector, like a silver dish, to a large softbox. The large softbox is much warmer. But let's say I grab an umbrella out of the back that's really, really old, it's worn. it's actually pretty yellow and the picture will become even warmer. So to get the white balance correct, you take a picture of color checker and then set the gray point as your neutral point. James Freeman. Yes, Drive is good for inspiration. Rugel. Nobody get mad at me for pronouncing names wrongly. Incorrectly. Okay, so it says, you look like you're starting to use projections in your body shots. What kind of projection equipment do you use, and how do you balance the light with strobes? So I have an account where I shoot fine art nude photography, and I've been doing a lot using digital projectors. So it's not like a special modifier. It's literally a digital projector. First of all, my recommendation is you want to get the highest number of lumens that you can afford, which basically means as bright as you can afford. I think the projector I have, I might be lying on this, is about 3,000 lumens. And when I bought it, it was about $1,200. But I also do presentations, so it was important that it was a good quality one for me. So I have this projector, and one of the ways that I make projector images not look cheap, at least in my opinion they don't, is that I mix projector and strobes. So what I mean by that is what I'll do is I'll project a pattern on the subject's body, for example. And then what I will do is I will light the background, maybe light it with a gel. So you just see the projection on the body, and then the background becomes a pure color. The key there is what you run into is because the projector is so low, you actually need to shoot at a wide aperture and a high ISO so that the projector is correctly exposed. But by shooting at a wide aperture and a high ISO, when you introduce strobes, they're often too bright. So you need to actually have a lower powered strobe, or have a strobe that can go down, like dial down pretty low, or you can maybe diffuse them or add a neutral density filter. You just have to try to balance, and it can be a challenge. The other thing that sometimes makes them look a little bit better is if I drag my shutter a little bit. So I actually purposefully make them blurry, because sometimes you can actually see, if you don't have a really high resolution projector, you'll actually see some of the pixels. And so if you purposely blur just a bit and go for something more abstract and painterly, then it's not a problem. Or instead of having the projection crisp, you blur it on the lens of the projector. So at times what I've done is I project it on the background behind the subject, and then I kick that projection a little bit out of focus. So so my projector is not anything special. I just bought the strongest I could buy, most powerful. Okay, next, Adeep Krishna, portrait photography tips on a low budget. I think first and foremost is just shoot natural light as much as you can. There's so many beautiful portraits done with window light. Irving Penn, many of his beautiful portraits and fashion images were done with one large window. So it doesn't need to be anything complicated. But then you understand how turning the subject towards the window makes a difference, how adding negative fill, a V-flat, can make a difference, how adding reflectors underneath. So use a window, use natural light, keep it simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. Next up, I scrolled down too far. Hold on. Raul, in the times when it's difficult to shoot, quarantine, do you think publishing other genre hurts your style, or should you keep the style and focus on growing your business strategy? That's hard. I get it. Now, I will say, when you have a style, even though typically you would want it to be the same subject matter, it doesn't have to be. Like, I can shoot product in my style, for example, clean, bold, and graphic. I could shoot abstracts in that style as well. I could also do self-portraits in that style. That being said, it's not easy. Like, I understand your concern. It's a balance. I don't know if you live with somebody, or if there's someone that is in your immediate vicinity you could work with, or if you go outside your style. But if you simply can't shoot, I wouldn't just throw up old work, and I wouldn't just throw up things that don't make any sense. Instead, what I would do is I would focus much more on your business and strategy and planning. Let's see. I think it looks like there we go. I'm trying to get my camera focused. Better. Okay. Cool. Next up, let's see. Any recommendations how to develop one's own unique style? My work feels derivative and largely influenced by others. That's a really good question. I think one of the most important things is to stop looking only at photographers for inspiration. So many of us are looking at the same handful of whether it's influencers or educators. We look at the same people, and of course it's going to feel like their work. Look at films, paintings, sculpture. Like, try to be inspired by things that are not what everyone is constantly looking at. And I think that will make a big difference. Okay, this is, I have no idea. Osgur? Oscar? Oscar. It looks like Oscar. Okay. How will the future of our business in the new world order after we overcome the global disaster? How will photography genres be affected? Man, I feel like if I knew, I'd be super rich. I think it'll be interesting because one way that it could be affected in the portrait world would be that people realize even more how precious life is, and they realize that any one of their loved ones could have been sick or could be lost. And so maybe they value family portrait photography more than ever before, and so there'll actually be more demand for portraiture. That could be an effect. On the other side, people could be more cautious with their money, and it may be difficult for people to part with it. And so you may have to market a little bit harder and truly communicate the value of a family portrait, for example, a little more than you may have in the past. I think another thing that you'll see is of course, some photographers will no longer be photographers, but I actually think you might see quite a few new people enter the industry, because it may be people that lost their job, the job they had been stuck in, and then they no longer have that job and say, you know what, life's short. I want to be a photographer because this is something I'm passionate about. So I think that the community will continue to grow. I don't think it'll shrink and disappear. But I also see how many photographers are joining together in this difficult time. And I think we're all helping each other. And I think education is important as ever in community. And I'm in many Facebook groups where people are just giving each other advice on what to do. And what they should work on in these difficult times, but also just best business practices. So I think that there could be good things ahead as well. Paulo, I suppose you... Paulo said, I suppose you filled your phone's photo folder when you saw Blade Runner. Yeah, I actually did a Blade Runner inspired shoot for a couple's shoot that I did in, I think it was October or something like that. So yes, that's true. Dennis McRae said, what is your color grading process? So here's the challenge. Color grading is not something I can exactly just talk about. I do have to show you, and that's it's going to be a tutorial that I'm going to work on. I believe that I'll have it come out in early fall. My thought process was I wasn't ready to do it right now, and then usually people are out shooting in the summer, and I'm hoping that we all get to go out and shoot in the summer and don't have to get stuck in here, and then in the fall people will be back in and ready to learn about color grading. So color grading is when you change the contrast, the white balance, and the color tonations, the color of your photograph. Typically what I do is my color grading begins with white balance. So am I making the photograph warmer or cooler? And then I do that usually in Capture One or Lightroom, but usually Capture One. And then I'm actually doing my color grading in Photoshop, and typically that's using a tool called Selective Color. Or I do color layers using Blend If. Like there's quite a few different things. But I think the most important part of the process is trying to know what you're communicating with your image. Should it be cool, calm, mysterious? Is it meant to have a vintage feel? And sure, you can experiment and guess and just try different things. But I always find it helpful if I have something guiding me and some idea of what I'm trying to say through my photograph. A Buster says, how do you begin bidding for professional jobs in magazines? Are these posted somewhere, or do you establish individual relationships with each creative director? Where do I start? Excellent question. One of the things I want to let you know, and this isn't strictly true, but it's true in the fashion and beauty world, is most of the time fashion editorials in magazines pay you nothing. And by nothing, I literally mean nothing, like $0.00. An editorial is a collection of images that tell a story. It is typically 6, 8, 12 pages. Maybe the theme's pastels. Maybe the themes is knitwear, whatever it may be. And it's usually keeping up with the season's trends or the next season's trends. But it's meant as an opportunity for you to showcase your skill set and your style. And so the downside is that people expect you to do it for next to nothing. For example, when I shoot for, like, I have a couple Elle magazines, international Elle magazines that I shoot for, I get like a $600 budget. Typically on a shoot day, when I pay for a whole team, the food alone was a couple hundred, you know? So you're not going to make money shooting editorials. That being said, advertising, totally different story. Magazine covers pay well, pay okay. Advertorials is something that looks like an editorial, but it's all one brand, and you're paid by the magazine or the brand to shoot that series of images. So it comes across less of an ad, and it seems more organic, which people, a lot of times brands prefer. Those are paid. So first and foremost, I just wanted to warn you that magazine pay is not the highest. Let me get this. Focus on me. Hello. Well, let me see if I can get this to focus on me. It felt like that was logical, but I'm not sure it was. Okay. So to build off the second part of that question. Whoa. Hey, camera. Hold on. I'm going to turn on another light. Let's see if that works. Helps it a little bit. Let's see. Ooh, whoa, bright. I do not think that overhead light helps that much. Hold up. I'm going to rotate just a bit. So, oops. Turn this way. Okay, so as you can see, mixed white balance here. I have warm light from the background behind, and then there's window light hitting me here, which it is late in the day, so it is cooler. Okay. Let's lock that in place. Okay, so next up here. To finish off that question about the magazines. So if you're trying to get published in a magazine, if that's basically the question, is there are websites that technically allow you to submit to multiple magazines. One of them is called Cavyar. So it's Kavyar. A lot of times those require you to pay to submit to some of these magazines. Other ones are free, so that is an option. I also have a guide that I put together that was called Get Published. If you search it, it's a free PDF. It had, I think, 75 different magazines that accept submissions. I actually think currently my intern, good idea here. He is not doing anything right now. Not doing nothing, but he's doing minimal because there's no shoots and all of that. So I think this is a good project to have him update it. But there are many different magazines that take submissions. And when you look on the magazines, there'll be deadlines. Sometimes on their website, they'll tell you upcoming deadlines, upcoming themes that they may have. But you also have to realize that whatever season you're in now is not the season that you're publishing. So right now it's spring. We're publishing summer. Like, we're into summer editorials at this point. So you just have to make sure that the content you're producing is relevant to when the images are going to be produced, or when they're going to be published, I mean. So yes, most of the time I'm doing research. There is a database for the bigger magazines. The bigger magazines, the database is called Agency Access. You pay an annual fee, and you can do North America, Europe, Asia. You can search these, and then it will have like the editor-in-chiefs and the photo editors of the L's, Harper's Bazaars, Numeros, all of that on their websites, on this database. It's not cheap though. It is at least over $1,000 per year for the database, $1,000 US to access it. Next up, Nicholas Cooper. I am transitioning from fashion work to environmental portraits. What's the best way for me to fill out my portfolio? I don't want to shoot on my websites, but I also don't want fashion either. Oh, I understand. You don't want just like 2 shoots on your website. I think you need to do a personal project. I think you need to do a personal portrait project where you pick that maybe you photograph. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but like healthcare workers after the fact, you do portraits of them on location, and that becomes a project. Or you'd photograph dancers, or you photograph, whatever interests you, whatever you're passionate about, and try to combine that into a project. And that way your website is populated, even if it isn't commercial work. But shoot free shoots, shoot people that interest you, figure out stories or visuals you want to create, cast people, regular people, and fill out your portfolio that way. Try to do days where you shoot twice a month and try to shoot 4 different people. Just knock it out, and then you'll have a bunch of different shoots. But come into the shoot knowing what you're looking for, so you actually come away with 1 or 2 great images, like right off the bat. Sandra Poland, how many years in were you before you were able to identify your style, and what point were you able to define it? Fantastic. Really good question. I was 8 years in before I really had any sort of a style that I felt like really was mine. What happened was I was near the end of college, and I was shooting, and I photographed my roommate, and we did her hair all big, and we put red Gerber daisies in her hair. And I paled out her skin, so it was white and red dress. And then a little bit later, I did a shot of a girl in my psychology class, white out skin, red cyberpunk glasses, bright red lips. And these are the ones where it was just like, oh man, like these were grabbing people's attention. They felt like right for me. And so it was when I shot those images, I think there's something here. I think it's something unique to me. I'm not ripping off anyone else. Like, it doesn't feel overly derivative. It's just things that speak to me, things that I get excited by. And it was things that people responded to as well. So it took me 8 years, and it wasn't on purpose. And so I try to help people to identify their style earlier on, so that you don't have to wait 8 years to figure it out. Dan Browning, I am starting off in portraiture, and I want to have hair and makeup artist. Do you build the cost into your fee, or charge an artistic fee and add them to the bill? Is there a percentage markup? Really good question. So my hairstylist, makeup artist, they are built into my fee. So you can't hire me without hair and makeup. Even guys, I just hire a groomer, is what they're called instead, because a lot of times guys, like I had this guy hire me, paid a ton of money to come to the shoot, right? And he just it wasn't 5 o'clock shadow. It just was not groomed facial hair. It's like, oh, I forgot to shave. And it's like, yeah, no, I want the best for this person too. So I have somebody that can do men's facial hair and men's hair as well. So it's built into the cost of the shoot. I don't do like a markup or anything. I pay those people those rates. When I first started, that wasn't the case. When I first started, I made a partnership with the hair and makeup salon around the corner. So they're called Hair Color Cafe. And so the arrangement was that people would go to Hair Color Cafe before the shoot to get their look done. We weren't doing anything creative. It was just basic hair and makeup look, but it made it more of a pamper session. And it was included, I didn't do a session fee. What I have is I have a minimum purchase. So if you hired me, it's not like it was like, okay, $300 sitting fee and a $200 hair and makeup or whatever. It was, you need to spend, to get this session, which includes hair and makeup, you have a $500 minimum, an $800 minimum, whatever it may be. I think it was just a better approach for how I like to work. Because then they felt like they were still getting something for what they're paying. But it helped to make sure I'm covering the cost that I incurred from having hair and makeup included. Let's see. Ricardo Ferreira. How old are your studio lights? I have a mix of studio lights. I have ProPhoto D1s and D2s. I bought the D1s when they first came out, and then the D2s I got again when they first came out. So for ages before that, I had a lot of cheap studio lighting. And when I finally decided to, go big was when the D1s came out, because I wanted ProPhoto lights, but I didn't want the cost of the pack and head system. So it was the first time I felt like it was within budget and made sense for me. Sure. So Joy McDermott says, how do you coexist with another photographer in the same area that shoots a similar style? Senior portraits with a fashion flair, for example. Good question. I think part of it is that just because they shoot fashion styled seniors, for example, it doesn't mean it's the same style. You might do bright and colorful. They might do more soft and feminine in the way that they shoot. So that part is not necessarily style, and you can still develop your own unique visual voice. But I think the way that you survive or the way that you coexist is that you form relationships with other organizations or school boards or whatever it may be, so that you feel more integrated. And the people that are making decisions is a mix of the kids and the parents, right? So find ways to be involved in that community, and that'll help you out a lot. Let's see, Weary Good Life. Thanks for the webinar. I have a question. How to get clients when in your city there are so many portrait photographers with high quality photos and gear. So first of all, most people, I'm just talking about most of our clients. I'm not trying to insult most people, but within reason. They don't know the difference between good gear and bad gear. I mean, maybe like, oh, look, that's a big lens or something, but that's not how they're making the decisions. The next part of that is like high quality photos. I think people don't technically know high quality. They know what speaks to them. So, it might be something that looks more like free heart, like kind of hippie style, a little bit boho, natural light. That might attract somebody. And then another person might like imagery that's bold, multiple lights, really polished. Like they couldn't tell you like, oh yeah, I like multiple lights, but they know they like that punchier look. So I think that's the key, is to figure out what your visual style is and then try to attract those people. But more important than that is, let's say your style is that bold and punchy look. You like rim lights and hard light. Well, then you need to start marketing towards people that would like that look, which might be athletes or fitness, people in the fitness realm, right? It's so you figure out your style and then the audience that would like that style, and then you try to bring the two together. Sheila Mendez. Question, how do you pass from babies to fashion? Any tips in the creative personal growth? So I talked about this in my webinar earlier. Basically, I just set up a lot of creative shoots. What I did is I still shot the babies for pay. And then I was shooting my own personal portfolio. I originally started with high school seniors, doing a fashion twist to them. And then I started to work and started to market towards the fashion world. But I actually developed a new website, new social presence. I set them up separately and eventually shut down the babies and family portraiture and then focused solely on the fashion and beauty. So it was such a huge difference. Christian. Hi, Lindsay. My question is, when and how do you come up with an idea to actually lead your photography to fashion? What were your first steps and what were your first challenges? So when I decided I wanted to do fashion photography, I actually began doing high school senior portraits. So what I would do is I would take high school seniors that during their session, when we did something, like when there was somebody who I felt like enjoyed being photographed, they were easy to work with, then what I would do is I would convince them to do another shoot with me. And we would play dress up, and we'd go out on location, and we'd maybe go to a local boutique and borrow clothing, whatever it may be. So then what I would do is where I had my small business was in upstate New York, about 3.5 to 4 hours outside of New York City. So what I began to do is reach out and network with models through Model Mayhem, through agencies, through whatnot in the city. And because it was 3.5, 4 hours away, what I would do is I would take the first bus out, go to New York, and shoot in Central Park or shoot on the streets. Or there were dance studios that you could rent, and I'd bring, just a couple of lights, and I would shoot with models. And then I would take the bus back home in the evening and do the same thing for marketing. So if somebody were willing to meet with me to have a meeting about my work or just critique or whatever it may be, I would take the first bus down, have a lunch meeting, have an afternoon meeting or an evening meeting. So it began as just making little steps to try to connect with people. When I connected during my test shoots, when I'd go to Central Park, I was trying to connect through social media as well as agencies. I connected with hair, makeup, and wardrobe stylists. These people living in New York or living in whatever city that you're aiming to connect with people in, they live there. They already have the connections with potential clients, brands. Like they're already integrated into that world. So if you can connect with them, they are the secret. Like truly, they're what helps you get into that world. Let's see if I can focus. There we go. Examiner K, will you be demonstrating today any of the concepts you were discussing? Usage of light meter? No. Nope, but I have a class. If you go to lindsayadler.photo/MSL, I have a 15-hour studio lighting course. Also, if you go to Adorama TV, if you go to their YouTube channel, I bet you any of these questions that you have for light meters, like I know they have a light meter video, and I know they have speed light essential video. So if you go there, it's a fantastic free resource. So just go to Adorama's YouTube channel. Row Visions, if you could give any advice to your younger self about the business of photography, what advice would you give? It is the people that you meet and network with that help open doors. In the beginning, I think most photographers suffer from this. We feel like we're not good enough. You're like, I'm not good enough at shooting. I'm not good enough at photography. My portfolio isn't strong enough. Like you just feel like you're not good enough in general. And so you don't put yourself out there. And then you don't submit your stuff. And first of all, you'll never feel good enough. I mean, maybe some people have a big ego, but you always feel like you're missing something. You always feel like you can get better. And so I would tell myself, start marketing, start pushing yourself sooner. You are good enough. You will get better, but you are good enough now. And then I would say, make an effort to connect with people that are connected because they're the ones that are going to open the doors. Let's see. Someone said, this is Cusel1. What are your views on retouching unattainable beauty standards for women? This is a good question. So right now there is a trend in the commercial world of going one of two directions. It is authentic or fantasy. Those are the two directions. So what I mean by that is in fashion and beauty, you either go authentic, which means there's minimal retouching. It tends to be natural light. The styling isn't avant-garde. It's meant to be more relatable, perhaps more streetwear, but it's meant to be authentically that person's individuality. And then on the other side is just super avant-garde, perfection, fantasy, heavy retouching, intense lighting. And I think those make sense. I think that the intense, avant-garde, clearly fantasy images should be able to go as fantasy and retouch as they want. Make a girl look like a cyborg if you want. It's art. There shouldn't be restrictions on it. But I also understand that with something that is meant to look natural skincare, looks like natural light, like an everyday girl, which is just perfect, I understand that that can be confusing and misleading. And this is why in that industry, there's a big trend. The luxury brands, whether it's the Dior or whatnot, they're still very much like the very polished perfection, but that's representative of their brand. Whereas a Glossier or some of the other brands are much more unretouched and relatable. So either way, I think it's helpful if it's clear where they stand. Dennis McRae says, how do you find makeup artists, hairstylists, models? Hair and makeup, I for sure find on Instagram. I follow people whose work I admire and I try to connect with them and try to produce art with them. Models, it's modeling agencies most of the time. If you look for New York, for example, I think there's 30, 40 modeling agencies for real. And you want to make a phone call and try to connect with the agents rather than sending emails because it's easy to ignore emails. Jim Hayes says, will you be back to ClickCon this year? I think I will not be. Bill P says, where are you? It looks like a great location. This is my boyfriend's house. He purchased a home that was a barn from the late 1700s that in the 60s was converted into a home. And it is our beautiful little sanctuary during these challenging times. So like right over here, there's a beautiful little fire going. It's super homey and romantic, and we've been staying out here for the last few weeks. Castiel says, Miss Adler, I've been watching from afar. Keep inspiring, keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. Stella says, if you're starting out and are yet to realize your style, do you think it's a good idea to keep a blog of images in order to look back on, to pick up a style that you may not realize was there? I think content, there's a famous saying that content is king, because content it's SEO friendly. It's what helps people connect to you as a photographer. I think more content is always good. And if there's something you need to hide in the future, you can remove it. I know that right now, when you search certain keywords in Google, like red editorial, you find my images. That's what comes up in Google Images. But it's not my new images. It's my old images that were blog posts that have been up forever. They have weight to them and gravitas. And so I think it's certainly helpful. I don't think you can hurt yourself by creating more content. Rich, I'm going to say Formica, but it could be Formica. Formica said, do you ever feel imposter syndrome during a shoot? And if so, how long did it take to gain confidence when a shoot came your way? So the idea of imposter syndrome, if you guys don't know this, I think everybody suffers from it. You're on a shoot and you're like, oh crap, like I'm not good enough for this. Like they should have hired somebody else. Like I don't belong here. I definitely still sometimes get that feeling because you're on a set and there's 50 people and you're the one in charge. Like I had that happen recently. But it's something with practice that eventually decreases, it eventually goes away. I think when you start realizing over and over again that the clients are happy and you're producing what they asked for and more, you realize, oh, maybe I was the right solution for them. So everyone suffers from it. It's not just you, don't worry. Scroll down here. Let's see. I'm going to answer some of these a little bit shorter just to make sure that I can get through a few more questions before the end of the shoot. Or before the end of the webinar. Let's see. Adam says, I have a ProPhoto A1. What other gear with ProPhoto should I get? Unfortunately, that is too broad of a question because it depends on what you shoot. What's important to you? Portability? Do you like soft light? Do you like more polished shoots, or are you just augmenting natural light? So unfortunately, it really depends on what type of images you create. Daryl says, I have a huge problem with group shots. What do you recommend when it comes to lighting a group shots going up to 8, 10, 12 people? So get your light source as large as you possibly can. Use large umbrellas with diffusion, and you likely need to use multiple. Now, if you have the ability to have a big setup, a 12 by 12 foot scrim is gorgeous. It is a huge even light source that can light however many people you have. However, it's huge, right? So I would go with an extra large umbrella with diffusion, maybe 2 of them. And then also you will definitely need a fill light because the fill light will control the shadow. So it's not an easy task, but it is doable. Gregory Stannis says, do you use mirrorless or DSLR? I use both. Doug Evans, hi Lindsay, thank you for doing this. Staying up in the northwest corner of Connecticut. What would you do, or what would you shoot to practice if people are not available? It says, any chance of another tour? I don't have a tour, obviously, in the near future, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just don't know what I would teach. Like what would be the most useful thing? I definitely would test with a mannequin. Like, it's totally fine. In my master studio lighting class, which I mentioned before, a lot of it, or some of it in the beginning, I used a mannequin to show, it's just as valuable to learn those concepts. There actually also are 3D modeling programs, like 3D programs that allow you to move light sources around so that you can actually practice studio lighting, but you're practicing it virtually. And so one of them is called Set-A-Light 3D. And that one's pretty cool. And you can pick a model, style a model, do the hair, makeup, and pose, and then you can move lights around in a 3D space. Let's see. Nalise, I'm having difficulty persuading more experienced photographers to work with me. I have a couple images, but it's hard to find professional help. They want to charge. I don't know if it means you're a model. If you I'm sorry, I can't tell if you're a model or a photographer. Patrick said, do you feel like zoom lenses like the 70 to 200 will become more used with social distancing? I mean, maybe in the beginning. I think long term it will make a difference. Let's see. Jim Hayes says, how many assistants do you have on a shoot? I have 2 assistants on a shoot, pretty much all my shoots. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, is it necessary? No, I just do. I have a first assistant who is in charge. Typically it's one of my assistants, Steven, who's been with me for, I think, 6 years now. So he knows exactly what I want without saying it 90% of the time. He knows where I want the light to be. He knows when something's irritating me without me having to tell him. And then I usually have an intern. I have paid internship programs, usually 3 times a year. And the intern, the goal for them is to learn to think like my first assistants. And then after the internship, they graduate to assistants. And so on my big commercial shoots, I have 3 assistants. On my smaller shoots, it's 2. And then if it's just a makeup, like a beauty shoot with, like, there's nothing going on, it's just a model and hair and makeup, no big sets, no big clients, then it just can be 1 assistant. But I never work alone. Let's see. What camera are you filming with this with? It's a Logitech something. It's just a little webcam. Say, where do you draw your inspiration from during photographer's block? That's cute, instead of writer's block. I just think I try to expose myself to inspiration all the time, as much as I possibly can. I watch movies, I read books, I try not to look just at photography. So, here in the house, I have books on nude sketches. We have books on, like, I'm looking over, like, on our bookshelf over here, there's a book on Rembrandt paintings, but there's also a Herb Ritts book, there's a Helmut Newton book, right? So I'm just constantly looking at different images. I also buy a lot of fine art photography books, many. Between Chris and we probably have 100 and something fine art books. And we try, I would say probably once a week, we stop and just bring out a fine art just fine art book, although the nude one is the one that's out right now, but we'll bring out an art book and just flip through it and just talk about it. And it might only be for 15, 20 minutes to flip through the book, but sometimes you just need that little bit of unexpected inspiration. So I believe you have to chase your muses and instead of expecting them to come to you. I also look at a lot of Instagram. Let's see. From Alvaro, says, hi from South America in Bolivia. In black and white, leaving away the motion technically, which kind of tones do you use? Hard contrast. I usually, for my black and white images, I'm going to take that back. There's no usually. When I use soft light, I just process it with more contrast. When I use hard light, it already has more contrast. So black and whites look beautiful with everything. Let's see. Rose says, I know you included your hair and makeup into your packages. What would you do if the client can provide those services themselves? I still don't let them provide it themselves because I've had a few times, well, actually I've had several times where someone shows up, they did their own hair and makeup, or the friend did it who was a makeup artist, and it was crappy. So I know that my hair and makeup, I know their quality. So what I say is, if you're looking for the look I have to offer, my creative team is an essential part of that style. And that's how I communicate and get people to agree to it. I'm not sure if you remember the photo you took in the book, or Yabi, you're missing blur. Okay, so I have a class. This is for Row Vision's next question about, there was a picture I had of Yabi with blur as a model. He said, how do I achieve it? So basically, I have a class called The Magic of Gels, where I go in depth on how I use gels, both color theory, placement of gels, saturation of gels, all of that stuff. There is a video section, and then there is a lighting recipe section, a companion guide that tells you exactly placement of light, modifier, all of that. So I don't know if did you look at the companion guide? Because the companion guide should tell you exactly how it's done. But yes, there was I actually think you're talking about the one that's in my Instagram. I photographed him as well for the companion guide. But anyway, for it, there's an overhead strobe, 2 rim lights as strobe. And then in the front, I had a constant light that was just a gel. It was just a modeling light with a gel on it. So what I did is I took the strobe and it froze the edges of him in place, and then the light from above lit his face. But then the gel in the front, because it is a constant light, I use a slow shutter speed, probably around 1/10 of a second, and then I move my camera. So what it would do is it would give him the appearance of moving, even though he was stationary. I would be moving my camera. Let's see. Lalisha Dove, can you do a tutorial on smoothing and editing hair for a hair ad? I've done a little bit of this on Learn with Lindsay. I actually have a little bit of a tutorial on improving hair. Sometimes it's using blend modes, using lighten and darken so that you can fill in spaces so that it becomes a little bit more perfect. And I also do a lot of contouring, so I can lighten the highlights and darken the shadows. So this is Duncan. My question is this: do you have any advice for someone transitioning from photojournalism to studio photography? Remember in studio photography that absolutely everything is in your control, so there's no excuses. Every pixel, every highlight, everything. As a photojournalist, the benefit for you is that you're meant to capture spontaneous moments, and so you'll be ready to capture when there's a perfect emotion or whatever it may be. But everything's under your control, so you have to pay close attention to that. And there's no, basically, if there's anything that's off, it's your fault, so you have to fix it. Let's see. Dennis, are you still doing Dream Shoot rentals? I actually sold that business. Cosmo says, I have 2 flashes, a 600 EX11 and a 2 and a 500 EX2. I noticed that the white balance has changed, but it is 20 years old. Huh. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that could happen. I don't know the technical reason why, but sure. Theresame. Some tutorials on your website aren't downloadable. Some of them are streaming. It's basically to help prevent piracy. All right. June Narad. Hey, Lindsay, who is the target audience for more fine art style portraits? I know it's not for everyone, not as commercial, but maybe some more conceptual. Yes, I have, and the person, and June Narad says maybe other artists. Absolutely. I have tons of other artists hire me. My next cool shoot is I have a family of magicians that I'll be photographing. They were originally scheduled for May. I'm not sure how this will all work with everything that's going on, but it's a family of 4. They're performers. They get paid to do it. They're hiring me to do a really creative shoots with gels and stagecraft, and it's going to be awesome. I get hired by dancers a lot. I get hired by people that appreciate art most of the time. Okay. Let's see. Brian says your webcam is blowing out the exposure and the picture's blue. Yeah, it's mixed lighting. I'm getting lit by the window. It's getting dark over here. What do you call, Joseph Chan, what do you call the arm stand with constant or strobe above the head? So typically it's going to be a boom arm, or they'll call it a mini boom or a boom. There's another company, I can't remember quite what it's called, that I have that's it's like a crane arm. It's a huge arm that goes out, but boom arm is what I use. The key is that you want to use a really strong, stable C-stand, a wide base stand, and then you want to make sure that you counterweight that arm when it's out over your subject. Rick Houvera says they were asking about connecting the Canon M100 into Sony. I have no idea. Can you have a free copy of my book on poses? No. So Night Razor, yeah. So I mean, the C stand is the base stand, and then you'll have a telescoping arm or a boom arm on there. I often use the arm called the Avenger D600. The Avenger D600 is a really good arm for booming something out over top of the subject. But again, remember, it's all about the balance and the weight. You can't use a regular stand if you're going to do that. It has to be a really broad C-stand, something strong, metal, probably a little bit more expensive, but if you're going to do that, it's for safety. Okay, so I think that's probably our time. It's been just a little bit over an hour, and I really appreciate all the wide range of questions you guys asked. You got everything from inspiration to technique, whether it was lighting or gear choices, and also a lot on business. I think that you guys have your heads in the right place. I saw quite a few people in the questions and in the chat talking about spending this time to learn and to network and to try to grow your business. And I think that is exactly what you should be doing right now. So thank you everybody for joining me. I appreciate it. And don't forget, if you are producing, if you are shooting during this time you're learning, you should definitely use the hashtag that right now that Adorama is putting out there. So the hashtag is, let me see if I can find it. It's create no matter what. So it's hashtag create no matter what. And I just learned about this today. So as I am creating education, and hopefully as I create images, I'm going to use that as well. So thanks everybody. Bye.